everybody. I'm Amy.
And I'm Paul.
And welcome back to the Comics Hall. Oh my goodness, this is volume
Hello.
2. They didn't reboot or retcon us. This is year 2 of the Comics Hall. We are kicking off 2021 with a recap of the best of 2020 as voted by you, the fans. So if you don't like it, take it up with yourselves. But before we get into that, we do have a lovely moderator in our chats today. You can talk to her. So do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, everybody. Jasmine here. We're live on Twitch in the Let Your Geek Sideshow Facebook group, on our Facebook page, on Instagram. So enjoy the show, and it's nice to see you all again.
Oh my goodness.
It sure
it's like
is.
getting back on a bicycle after how many weeks away. This is
Right.
very exciting. Lots of new books that dropped this week, and we actually couldn't cover all of them this week because we are doing our recap. So if you do want to see what Paul and I pulled this week, you can check out our Instagram story first and foremost, but we will run through a quick list of the biggest hits for this week, and some of them might make an appearance on next week's show, depending on how things go. So, Paul, you want to kick us off with the new book releases this week?
I sure do. I'm going to, of course, because, well, you know this, but I kind of like DC a little bit. DC had some huge releases today. Not only did they start a huge event, but we've got the end of a year, almost like a 13-month event in DC Death Metal number 7 comes out today. We've also got Generation Shattered, which sort of picks up some pieces from Dark Knight's Death Metal number 2 and some other stories that we've seen. But of course, Future State starts today. You've got Harley Quinn, Wonder Woman, Swamp Thing, the next Batman, and Superman of Metropolis are the current Future State books that are out right now. Oh, and The Flash is out right now. So there are quite a few books out there right now if you are interested. We're bringing our rapid fire round to the top of the show because we're not actually covering any new books today, but we still want to make sure you're all prepared.
Yeah, and I'm actually really excited about those Future State books. That may be one of the first few times you guys see me on this show reviewing DC stuff because I have titles from this week, and I've got some of the ones that are coming out next week. Very, very excited to jump on some of those. Next up, we do have Marvel. Very few new releases on the level of DC, but they are still hugely impactful. And for you variant comic book cover crazies out there, Marvel delivered this week. First and foremost, they've got the long-anticipated launch of the Eternals #1 by Kieran Gillen and Assad Ribic. And there are like 40 variant covers. Paul and I each grabbed a different one. You can see that on our Instagram story at the Comics Hall. Oh my goodness. And they've even got a nice page in the back that has a collection of some of the variants so you can see what other covers are out there. Speaking of variants as well, if you are watching our live show right now, right behind me, I do have a picture of Return of the Valkyries #1. This is a new #1 miniseries tie-in for the King in Black event. This is by, I believe, a newcomer artist, Nina Vacanueva, and Jason Aaron and Torrin Groenbeck, who have previously collaborated on the Jane Foster Valkyrie series. Awesome.
Nice.
Awesome. There are about 7 variant covers for this issue. I only picked up 4 of them this week, but what are you going to do? And then, of course, we do have Star Wars High Republic #1, which, Paul, you picked that up, right?
I did. And Star Wars High Republic, it's a huge new step forward, but backwards in the Star Wars universe. That is being released on multiple mediums. There's one in novel form that was just released. There's a manga that was just released as well, and the comic book version or corner of the new High Republic series of Phase 1, because this can be released in 3 phases, is Star Wars: The High Republic #1.
Awesome. We also do have a couple of indie darlings out this week. Keep an eye out for crossover #3. Don't let yourself get spoiled, but this is the first time that we see some of the actual comic book characters who live inside of the dome. There's a really cool, speaking of variants, there's a really cool Spawn variant for it this week. I picked up the normal cover, but don't let yourself get spoiled on what is going down in crossover 3 because it is picking up. And then another of Paul's enjoyed titles, Knock 'em Dead #2 from Aftershock Comics.
Go get it. It's good.
There are so many books out this week. We'll bring you some of these and new releases for next week. Next week when we get back to our normal book of the week format. But before we launch into our recap of this last incredible year, we do have a giveaway going on right now on our Instagram channel. Paul, do you want to explain a little bit more about that?
I sure do. So this giveaway is slightly different. Thank you, Chris. So we're going to be giving away the Daredevil Shadowland 6 scale figure by a little company called Sideshow Collectibles. Now, this giveaway, I believe, goes until the 9th. Now, this is not a Gleam giveaway. We're not pushing you to, follow a link and do all sorts of things like we have on our other ones. This one's real simple, and it's only available on our Instagram. And I would go now because those comments and such, they are already going wild. So all you got to do is like, comment, follow. You got to tag a friend, and then we did ask you a question of which run of Daredevil is your personal favorite. So you do all those things, and it's an entry into the Daredevil Shadowland 6 scale figure. And again, that goes till the 9th, and we'll pick a winner as soon as possible.
Yeah, and that is a highly limited edition variant of our standard long sold out Daredevil 6 scale figure. Beautiful, beautiful piece. I love that he's got the multiple configurations of his billy clubs. So if you're a fan of the Shadowland series, if you're a fan of Daredevil in general, you're going to want to check that out. And again, that is at the Comics Hall on Instagram, and it is our first post right now, or our most recent post.
Yep.
So you guys can check that out. But now it's the moment that you guys have all been waiting for. Over the last couple of weeks, we have asked you numerous times to lend your voices to our best of 2020 poll. We had 8 different categories for you guys to vote on, and these are our first nominees and inducted winners into what I like to call the Comics Hall of Fame. This is one full year around the sun. Amazing books. There were some challenges in the publishing and output of books earlier in the year, but every publisher, all the artists, creators, writers, distributors, retailers managed to succeed in this year, really bring some amazing content and still get comic books to people, even in different formats, in safe and new and engaging ways. So we wanted to celebrate that. We also wanted to check in with you guys because, I mean, Paul and I have our clear favorites all the time. And you guys get to hear about that a lot, but we wanted to know what you guys were into. So we have tallied up the votes, lots of great responses, and we have counted down in our 8 categories, which are best writer, best artist, best cover artist, top 3 publishers. So we didn't want to declare one the best, but we asked people how much from each publisher did you read this year? So which ones came out on top? Best comic book event for the year, best new series, best continuing series, and best adapted media. So something that isn't a comic book, but it is based on a comic book.
Right.
So let's just get right in with our best writer. Who is our best writer for 2020?
The best writer, as voted by all of you, is James Tynen the Fourth. Very, very, very well earned. He is actually he was my personal choice as well for best writer. He's written things along the line of course, Batman, Something is Killing the Children, which is the asset that you're seeing right now. He wrote Wind, Department of Truth, and he also launched a new horror magazine titled Razorblades, that sold out in physical copies, I believe over 2,000 orders on day one. I know that specifically because I'm incredibly salty that I didn't get one. I'm still very upset, but I did get it digitally, and it is wonderful. Now, Amy, you did read a couple of his books. It's funny. I know you didn't delve too much into Department of Truth or any of his Batman stuff, but you did read some of his books.
Right. I did the first couple issues of Department of Truth. I think I'm going to trade weight on that series personally, but really enjoyed Something is Killing the Children. I mean, that is one of those books that kind of snuck under the radar that a lot of at the beginning. At first. I think it's getting the praise it deserves currently, but some people are still not 100%, or it's one of those ones where they're like, I'm hearing a lot about it, but I'm not sure. But Something is Killing the Children, absolutely fantastic. Deserves all the praise that it's getting. I mean, look how freaking cool the Slaughter family mask is on that cover, and they've gotten an absolute murderer's row, pun intended, of artists to do the covers for those things. I loved the crossover cover it had with Department of Truth. So James Tynen has just been sweeping the stands this year. And a lot of great writers have done multiple books. And that is the thing that you'll notice, actually, our best writer, all the nominees had multiple books out this year, but the artists were mostly fixated on one book because of the demands of creating a comic book, it's a very interesting way to look at the industry, but just fantastic stuff. And Tynen has also done some amazing books like Mimetic for Boom Studios, which is the good time chill sloth that drives people insane. That one's such a fun look at viral culture in terms of internet culture and memes.
Yeah, I mean he's done so much, and I don't I don't want to toot our own horn here, Amy, but there tends to be a correlation between people we cover on some of our segments and people winning awards, whether now that award may be one within our own show, but still, Tynen was our first ever, busy bee of the month or busy bee of the week because he just puts out so much content constantly. And yeah, I do personally believe that he absolutely deserved this. And in case everyone's wondering, so we are going to show you all the photo of who you chose, and then we'll give you each who we personally voted for. In this particular case, I happen to have voted for Tynan as well. He was my choice because I read nearly everything on there. I read everything that he's pretty much done this year, with the exception of I'm not caught up on Something Is Killing the Children. So, Amy, let's ruffle some feathers. Who was your choice? Who did you vote for?
Well, I think it's safe to say that we both nominated a lot of the people. I mean, all the people on our list were our own nominees, but my personal choice for Best Writer of the Year is Kelly Thompson. Everything she touches is absolute gold. She is, of course, known for currently doing Deadpool, Captain Marvel. She did Jessica Jones previously. She did Sabrina she's kind of did Sabrina the Teenage Witch. West Coast Avengers, even though that wasn't this year. There was a third title this year that she was doing. Black Widow.
Black Widow.
There we go. Yes. That's right, because it did get delayed, but then it did finally come out. But everything Kelly Thompson does is exceptional quality. And when you've got characters like Jessica Jones, Captain Marvel, even Deadpool, and all these characters, like keeping their voices distinct is a Herculean feat. But every one of her Marvel characters just represents a complete understanding of that character's internal voice. But that is my personal choice. But I mean, she did get a lot of votes. There was a lot of love all across the board for all of our different writers. So, I absolutely agree with the audience picking James Tynen. That's a great choice for the sheer spread and variety of books that he wrote this year.
Yeah, and I know, and we are well aware of how difficult we made it with some of these choices, and that you can only pick one. But that's part of the fun. We can't, if we let someone pick everything, it would throw off the whole algorithm. But yeah, so congrats on he'll be in the Hall of Fame. I like to say, like in sports when they hang someone's jersey up in like the rafters. But I think because we're a comic book show, it's more fun if we put if we hang up their jersey on a raptor and just put it on an actual like dinosaur. That sounds like more fun. So
where are we going to get dinosaurs, Paul?
I don't know.
We'll work on that.
We'll go to management.
We've already jumped the shark in year 2. Comics Hall 2021. We've got raptors now, I guess. But we do need to press on. We've got lots more categories to cover. So this year we had Best Artist, of course, because books are 75%, if not more, artwork.
Right.
Incredible Herculean task of creating up to 22, sometimes 32, sometimes those poor artists who do the 50-page sized issues.
I don't know how they do it.
I know. So a lot of worthy contenders, but this year you guys decided that your artist of the year was Jorge Jimenez for Batman from DC Comics.
Yes. Jorge Jimenez honestly was the reason that I jumped back into Batman. I wasn't even fully convinced that I was going to read it when Tynen jumped on board after Tom King. But once I saw that Jorge Jimenez was going to do interiors and continuing art, I had to pick it up because, I mean, I just loved everything that he's done with Scott Snyder and Justice League. I mean, he's obviously a big DC get. He's a big DC name. As far as I know, I'm sorry, he hasn't done that many indie books. But I could be very, very wrong about that. But I mean, he's done everything he did obviously most of Batman, Detective Comics, Justice League. He worked on Punchline, the Robin 80th anniversary that came out. Remember when all those 80th anniversaries were coming out? Like,
oh my gosh,
like once a month or once every week.
Those 80-page 80th anniversaries.
It was the Joker, and then you had issue. Oh god, yeah, Joker, Green Lantern. There's so many. It was a good year for DC, I'd say. But he's done Superman Rebirth, and he did a bunch of covers. I don't normally spring for variant covers, but Amy knows there were some of those stock card variants that I was like, whatever. The price is what it is, but I want it. Now they're hanging up in my room. So Jorge Jimenez was who you all chose as the best artist. So we've got some of his art right here. That's some interiors that he did. I believe that's. Oh man, I didn't look this up, but I think is that Batman 87 or 88.
I don't remember the number. I did just pull it from his
Yeah.
Twitter as like a preview.
No problem. But it's one
He's
of
at
those.
Jorge Jimenez Art on Twitter if you
Yes.
want to check out. But yeah, absolutely beautiful. And it's very cool to see also the artist's work without the colorist.
Mhm.
The coloring can add and change the depth of the line art, but it's clear from Jorge Jimenez's line art here that he's just a consummate professional. Like just the values of the light and shadow and the textures going on in this piece.
Yeah,
Absolutely fantastic.
and totally personally, he's such a sweet man. Like all of his not his commissions, but all of his comps that he gets, he donates everything. He's such a nice man too. So, welcome to the Raptors, Jorge Jimenez. Now, and of course, if it wasn't obvious, Jorge Jimenez was also my choice for best artist. I loved everything that he had done this year. Amy,
I'm thinking
who was
Paul might have rigged the results
what do you
here.
mean, might? I totally did, 100%. Amy, who was your choice?
You're gonna make me sound like a dissenter. I'm staying in the DC family, but my choice for the artist of the year was Jamal Campbell for his work on our sector. Every single page, every single cover. And it's rare when an artist can make me go, I want the cover that the artist did, not the variant. Because like sometimes when they create their own cover, it's like, oh no, I'll get the variant because I'm gonna see their art inside. But Jamal Campbell, untouchable, just beautiful, beautiful. And Far Sector is by far one of my favorite books of the year.
Right.
Though it is not my choice for later in the list.
It is not,
we'll
no. But yeah, Jamal Campbell, if you're not too familiar with his art, definitely go check it out. Go read Far Sector. It's an incredible book. That, believe it or not, I am a huge I have Green Lantern fan. I have only gotten through 2 issues of that book. Despite Andrew Seiko's and Amy's, and I think Jazz is reading it. Are you reading it too, Jazz? And Jazz, everyone saying like, this is an excellent book. I know it's excellent. I just have not read it. But Jamal Campbell's an excellent choice.
Yes. Now, speaking of artists and mentioning variants, we're going to take a look on the outside of the book, and we asked you guys, who's your favorite cover artist? Because there are some artists who specialize exclusively in covers. You'll recognize names like Kevin Wada and others. I don't want to give away the nominees, but this was another tight race because it is very, very interesting because a lot of times the cover artist will be tied to one series. Sometimes they do a little bit everywhere. And I think that's what put our winner over the edge, kind of doing a little bit for every publisher. This year, you guys chose as your best cover artist of 2020, Peach Momoko.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Where did Peach Momoko come from? I feel like an explosion of amazing artwork throughout this year. You will recognize her from any publisher that you read.
Everything.
From everything. First of all, did a ton of Marvel, especially with the X of Swords line, or 10 of Swords. I always do that, 10 of Swords. DC variant covers, Image, IDW, and she signed a 20 cover deal with Boom Studios that got a lot of press earlier in the year. She also, no big surprise, was named one of Marvel's Stormbreakers, which was kind of their superstar artist that replaced the Young Guns program this year. And she will make her writing and interior art debut in Marvel Comics in March with Demon Days X-Men #1. So that's really cool. But there were so many times I went into our local store and just heard people going, yo, you got the Momoko cover? Like that's like people were just specifically like, I need the Peach Momoko cover of whatever's going on. She even did this really cool cover of King in Black where Null just looks fancy as hell, which is
fancy
great.
As hell.
He's a terrifying villain, but just if you scored even one Peach Momoko variant this year, then consider yourself lucky because these things are just, they're the top. They're beautiful.
Yeah, she worked on a real comic book charcuterie board because she had a bit of every single publisher all over the place. I'd actually pulled, so let us know in the comments, let Jazz know if you read any of these titles because Peach Momoko worked on them. We've got Punchline, Dark Knight Death Metal, Wind, Clock, pour one out for Clock. We Only Find Them When They're Dead, Something Is Killing the Children, Deceased Dead Planet, Black Cat, Spider-Woman, and Commanders in Crisis. Those are just some of the titles. I brought those up specifically because a lot of those have been covered in some way or form on the Comics Hall. But she's done so much, and she's one of the people that me and Amy like to say constantly, like Clayton Cowles. Like, when do they sleep? When do any of these human beings sleep? And none of her work has ever where I'm like, okay. I'm like, if I could buy everything, I would buy every single one of her covers. If you have a moment, look up her Peach Mocha's variant for Clock #1 by Image Comics. It is so weird, and it's very different, and it's kind of gory in a way. It's very like not her style. It's very opposite of this, but it's beautiful. It just really shows her range. So that is why it's apparent that all of you chose Peach Momoko as the best of 2020. So welcome to the Raptors, Peach Momoko.
Now you said charcuterie board, and I've been sitting here trying to think of a pun, and the best I could come up with charcuterie bag and board, but that's not funny. I had to say it though, just in case one person out there is like, "That's kind of funny." So if you think that's kind of funny, please validate me. Now I don't want to again sound like because I just shouldn't go to Vegas anytime soon. Like I didn't pick any of the winners, but like I completely agree with everybody's choices. My personal favorite cover artist of the year was Russell Dodderman because it is his time to shine with the X-Men books. I mean, this man was born to draw X-Men. I don't know if you've ever seen on his Instagram. Very cute. He's done some comparison images of the X-Men from the animated series he drew when he was a child in the 90s versus the X-Men he has drawn professionally for money for Marvel Comics. And it's just like, that's his mutant power, is drawing X-Men. So he was on Marauders. He was on the Giant Size X-Men books. He was on some Ten of Swords stuff as well.
That, and then he did the whole interiors, right, for that Jean Grey
and the Storm giant size.
Yeah, I mean, and it was insane. Hickman just let him just run rampant and just do Dodderman things, and it was incredible.
Yep.
Yeah, and also, it sounds like the fix is in, but it's not. But Peach Momoko was also my vote. I promise this isn't fixed because that about does it with like where your opinions and my opinions line up. From here on out, I think most of them are different. And there's some surprising ones on the list that we're going to come up with right now.
Yeah, we actually have a fun category. I liked this one because it actually it's not a who's the best, but we asked people to kind of consider what they are reading. Our next category is your top 3 publishers by how many books you read from them. Not necessarily who's the best of the best, which it does kind of correlate, even though correlation is not causation. If you're reading more books from them, they're probably one of the better ones in your opinion. But so we asked you guys, and this one should come as no surprise. The top 3 in this order were Marvel. I believe Marvel got about 81% of the votes as people's top reading choice. Then followed by DC with about a 68%, and then Image Comics with about 52% of you.
Right.
So that's a great that's kind of the standard comics package. If you're really following a lot of stuff right now, you're probably reading a Marvel, a DC, and an Image. So was the top 3 publishers by volume this year of what you read.
Totally. And this year, so again, that was what you all had voted on and saying what you were all reading as far as, so Marvel, more Marvel than DC, more DC than Image, and more Image than some of the other options. So, but our answers, mine and Amy's answers were different from each other and also different from what you all chose. And I'm sure Jazz's answers were different and everyone's answers are different. But mine personally was I did tally it all up. This might be the first year in my life I read more Marvel than I did DC.
Wow.
Not by a lot, but I definitely read more Marvel. And then DC in a very close second. And then surprisingly, I think, not surprisingly, like if you follow the show, but like if you're just talking shop, was Vault. I mean, Amy, we're kind of tallying up everything. I read a lot of Vault comics this year. And the only reason it beats out Image for me personally is because a lot of the Image titles that I was reading were carried over from 2019, or they took a break, or I was like, I'm going to trade weight. But with Vault, everything that was a #1, it hit immediately, and I threw it on my pool. So for me, it was Marvel, then DC, and then Vault Comics, because Vault Comics should be on your radar.
Yeah, so surprisingly, and similarly to you, my Image Comics books were really, I say a snooze, but not in a bad way, but many of them are on breaks, hiatuses. A lot of them actually have jumped to the format where they will release their full volume in trade. So books like Crowded, I didn't have as much because they're going into trade for their last volume. But no surprise, Marvel was my #1 publisher. Then Boom Studios for books like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Once and Future and all of We Only Find Them When They're Dead and Seven Secrets, all of those books. And then my third most populous publisher as well was Vault Comics. I had about 6 different titles from Vault. And as Paul said, all of them were immediate. Yes, this works. This hits. I need it on my pull list. two of my favorite overall books that I read from this entire year were Vault Comics books, and you guys should definitely check them out if you haven't already. They've just announced their slate of writers and artists for the next year, all the new talent that they are bringing into the Vault Comics family. They haven't even announced any of the titles except for like one, which that one is already one of my most anticipated books for the first half of this coming year. But the sheer amount of talent that they've set to introduce this coming year is definitely makes them worth a look. And they are not as numerous of titles as Marvel and DC are, but to have those smaller independent publishers still rank pretty highly in terms of how many of their books you're pulling is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. We here on the Comics Hall, we definitely love to, me and Amy read a gross amount of the big two, of course. We read it like, if it's on the rack at
it's
one
our soap
point,
operas, like
exactly. We love it. But there's nothing like finding, I was going to mention a book, but I can say like The Autumnal. The Autumnal is not really going to make it into the show, but The Autumnal by Vault is a book that, we were both like, oh, I heard it's really good. And then you read it and it's incredible. And it just brings more buzz to a publisher like Vault, who deserves all that buzz, which puts money in their pocket, which allows them to keep creating this content that we love. And so, I mean, there is something about just finding a really, really good indie book that is, I think it feels more personal. And I think that's sort of what happened this year with Vault for me, is like everything that Vault did, it touched a corner of my interest somewhere. Oh, am my camera going crazy? It sure is.
Just a little bit.
I have no idea what's happening. This is awesome. I'm so sorry.
Paul is becoming one with the multiverse.
I sure am. Yeah, give me 1 second, everyone. Sorry. But Emily, well, it's still going nuts. Here, let me see if I can switch the background. No, it's not helping.
All right, no worries. While you sort that out, yes, everything that you've said, just and that's something that I think if people are scared to jump into independent comics from the big two, that is one of those things that it's like you're not sure because you know Deadpool, Superman. It's a little less personal. It's more of a community experience. And there's like you can pick and choose the parts of canon that you enjoy. However, when you find an independent series that works for you, it feels so special. It just feels like you're like, yes, it's just me and these characters and anyone else who's reading the book. But it is really a lot more intimate, if that's a word for it. Kind of sounds weird, but it's a much smaller reading experience because it's just you and that independent series. There's no millions and millions and millions of backstories, and there's no Frank Miller's version of the Autumnal and Jason Aaron's version of the Autumnal. It's just you and the one story that's being told right then and there.
Right. I second
Agreed.
that. I was like, you know what? Whatever Amy's about to say is going to be incredibly profound. Let's give her her own square.
And here I was going, oh my gosh, just spinning my wheels, talking about how much I love these.
Talking about airplane food. Am I right?
Now, however, our next category was something that is entirely unique to the big two because of the intimacy of independent comics. They don't often have big crossover events, except for crossover. We're Donnie Cates. Thanks for making that difficult for us. But in terms of big two, we wanted to know what your guys' favorite event was, because a lot of people do get event fatigue. There's always events every year, numerous events, and a couple of the events got thrown off kilter this year by the publishing schedule, but there still were a lot of great stories to read, whether or not you were following every tie-in or just the main event books. So we did ask you guys what your favorite event was, and you guys decided by an overwhelming vote that 10 of Swords is your favorite comic book event of the year. Just to remind you guys, some of the other books that were there this year, there was Empire, there was Justice League Endless Winter, there was all the death metal that was going on, there was the Joker War, I feel, and then we had the very beginning of King in Black, but I think it's a little too early in the game to really make a full statement on that. But we had the start to finish of 10 of Swords, which was a 22-issue crossover. Very ambitious of Marvel. I do appreciate that they put a lot of kind of reading guides and checklists in their books for this, but just a really fun continuation of Jonathan Hickman's X-Men, bridging the gap between Dawn of X and what is to come, Reign of X, with the creative stylings of one of my favorite writers, Teenie Howard, who has been dutifully working on the Excalibur book, which Excalibur is my favorite X-Men team of all time, just the classic Claremont stuff, just like, yes. So seeing Excalibur have a kind of new heyday is really cool. But Ten of Swords, based on the title, was inspired by the tarot deck. There was a lot of fun storytelling related to the major and minor arcana. And this was the story of Krakoa and the nations Araco and Okara and their battle with Otherworld and all just the mutant history and dealing with the more magical side of, because a lot of mutant culture clashes with magic. And so just pitting these mutant nations against one another in a very ultimately fun and kind of whimsical Arthurian style battle that has serious ramifications for the X-Men going forward. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I thought so that was a crossover that I'm going to catch up on for sure, because I was just like, I can't read every single thing. And then we've even come on here, Amy, and said like, no way are we going to read everything. And then Amy read almost everything.
But most importantly to note, I regret not reading everything. When we got to the second half of the first half of the event, admittedly, I didn't read every single issue about how every champion found their swords. But the second half of the event, from issue 11 to 22, you got to read all of them. First of all, they've got all the fun, like, random champion battles that they've decided, and some of them are as wild as, like, having a wedding and getting drunk together and arm wrestling. And it's like, so that's really fun. And I missed a couple of those, and I regretted, so I had to go back and look for the missing issues, because it's really worth a full read. You can't half-ass Ten of Swords.
You cannot. You got a whole asset. Like you should everything. So I'd say with Ten of Swords, I was just coming off event fatigue, because I remember I had just read everything Empire. And I was like, I've got to stop. And in the meantime, I was also reading Dark Knight's Death Metal. And I was like, oh, and I'm going to read Endless Winter, which I didn't end up reading. But I 100% see why Ten of Swords was chosen. I also think it is the culmination of a lot of, time and, money that people put into Hickman when he started, when he restarted the X-Men line. So it totally makes sense why it was not only so successful, on the publisher side, but also why people loved it so much. But to no surprise, my personal pick is right behind me. It is Dark Knight's Death Metal, which just ended today, and it is leading into Future State. But I have such a soft spot for not only DC, but anything Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo do. So when they came back for a sequel to Metal, I was completely on board. I read, there's nothing that I missed with this, all of the road to it, everything. So it was sort of, it would feel like sacrilege if I had picked anything else, honestly.
Well, for once in a while, actually my vote was Ten of Swords as well. So.
Yes, it was.
Yes, it
was. I'm just saying. So it's not all me here, people.
All right. Paul, do you want to introduce our next category?
Yeah, so this is one of the ones where, not invalidating anything, but me and Amy were definitely surprised at the results of what was the best new series. So as voted by all of you, it is Wolverine. So Wolverine from the new Hickman verse, and that's Benjamin Percy, Victor Bogdanovich worked on it. I mean, a whole slew of different artists, and Andy Kubert, of course. Sorry, Andy Kubert, I forgot. But I think me and Amy were a little. Not, again, it sounds negative, but I don't mean to be negative. It's just there were so many new series that it being Wolverine maybe is just, it's familiar to people. And
but this, I would say it was Wolverine in a new capacity, given the fact, as we mentioned with Ten of Swords, the groundwork that Hickman has laid for the X-Men. And I will fully admit that before the Hoxpox summer, I wasn't following X-Men. The continuity was so difficult to follow, but there was great work with All New Wolverine for Laura Kinney, and we knew that there was Death of Wolverine because Logan was MIA, and there have been so many different threads with the characters, and a lot of the X-Men stuff kind of felt a little disparate. I know that Marvel kept it as best they could as one whole line, but with the way that Hickman kind of wiped the slate, introducing then a place where all the new X-Men story writers have a real cool and interesting and unique uh, kind of chamber of experimentation in Krakoa,
Yeah.
introducing Wolverine and showing his place in this new mutant nation where so many of his friends and allies are the quiet council and the leaders of this new sovereign nation.
Hmm.
And Wolverine kind of isn't all about that
Yeah.
pageantry. And I mean, even what we saw of him in Ten of Swords, and I actually, because it did cross over with Wolverine, so I really enjoyed those aspects of it. Just his kind of determination to be the gruff, rough and tumble guy he is, with the politics behind the new X-Men stuff, it's just really interesting.
Yeah.
I can see why people would be interested to see this new take and new exploration and perspective for a
Hmm.
character who everybody's pretty sure that they've got a pretty strong grip on in
Yeah.
terms of like, yeah, I know Wolverine. Like there's what can you really show? And then you put Krakoa in the mix and
Hmm.
it's a totally different experience.
Yeah, and this was a book that I read and I'm still reading. The only one I haven't read is, I believe, the one or two issues that have tied into Ten of Swords, because I'm not caught up and I don't want to spoil that for myself. But I am not someone who read X-Men previously to Hickman. I didn't really think about X-Men. I definitely didn't read Wolverine, but like Amy said, I had a grasp. Like, I know who he is, I know his backstory, and I know enough, in passing to get away with saying like, oh yeah, I love Wolverine. But Percy and Kubert and Bogdanovich, the whole team, they really did an excellent job of sort of making it as true a number one as you can get with Wolverine, because Wolverine has, just to be completely honest, an intimidating backlog and lore. There's just so much to Wolverine that ties into so many other stories that it can really be a deterrent to people who are trying to get in. And this team did an excellent job for people like me, and hopefully people like you, because you voted for it, that it it felt like this book is incredibly refreshing, and it's a good jumping on point for everyone, because again, Wolverine is incredibly complex and he's got a lot of room, to grow as a character, but it's incredibly intimidating to jump on. And you can definitely tell that Percy and Kubert and Bogdanovich being the artists, have been waiting for their chance to tell this story for a long time, because they definitely nip loose a lot of threads that they are 100% waiting to sort of re-unravel later on. And it's just nice to be able to jump on to a character with such a story tradition and be like, okay, I'm caught up. Like, this is my definitive version of Wolverine, which I know to some people is going to be a big slap in the face, but it's just my comic book Wolverine right now.
Yeah. Now, I know we didn't necessarily specify, but just in case people weren't clear, new series, the number one had to drop in 2020. And this was actually a series I thought started in 2019. So it surprised me just by the sheer fact. I was like, oh, yeah, that was last year, because I lost track of the calendar, because I believe it was February, kind of before the publishing
Mm,
halted in March. And then some of the schedules got thrown off. So
right.
the book release schedule did go a little helter skelter. Personally, my favorite new series of last year was Finger Guns from Vault Comics. The
Mhm.
Autumnal's up there too, but the Autumnal's not finished, and I know I love it so much, and I need it to be a complete story, and it's going to end in 2021. But Finger Guns 1 through 5, just a complete story with a surprising amount of emotional depth. The premise was so simple from the onset, but the character work. Just everything about that book. And that was Justin Richards and Val Halverson, Rebecca Nalty. Just a beautiful little story, a true example of what happens when a publisher identifies a story that'll work and just lets the team go loose on it. And
Right.
Finger Guns it was so surprisingly full of heart, and I just loved it. And I hope that it gets a second volume if the trade sales are good enough. So if you're curious about it, I highly recommend. You can get volume
Oh
one
yeah, 100%.
at your local comic store now. It does tell a complete story, but the ending will leave you wanting more. So fingers crossed that we get a Finger Guns volume 2 at some point.
Yes. Yeah. It's a great book. So my choice also for this is another independent book by Image Comics, which you've probably heard me gush over, is That Texas Blood by Chris Condon and Sean Phillips. Oh God, I can't say enough about this book. I love it so much. It's such a small town book by people who know the lay of the land. They know Texas, and they just get the voice. It's just the best way that I can explain it is they just get the voice without pandering. They don't, they're not hitting on too many cliches. And the story is just, even now, I mean, I'm 7 issues in. They're on break until March, but it never feels like, even though it's a slow, small town book, it never ever feels like it is, you're missing a beat. It's so good. The art is incredible. There's some incredible dramatic landscape, within Texas. It exists, I promise. But it's just absolutely beautiful. And not to mention, they also did something that I love, which I know Amy had said has happened, I believe, on a Hawkeye book, but they had almost every week or every 2 issues, there was a playlist that they put on Spotify for you to listen to while reading the comic. And it was incredible. I just loved everything about it. Sean Phillips and Chris Condon on Twitter are also just the nicest people. They're so grateful that anyone is reading their book, and I totally get it. Like, I would be the same way. But it's an incredible book. They're by an incredible team. So that Texas Blood was my favorite new series. If I could have covered it every week, I would have, but I didn't want to do that to everyone.
To clarify, yes, Matt Fraction on his
Right,
seminal Hawkeye run was the one who provided recommended listening. Now, on the flip side of new series, we had the continuing series, which is a series that launched before 2020. It could have been as early as 2019. It could have been even longer than that. And some of these continuing series have been going on a lot longer than I remember them. I guess my perception of comic book time is skewed. When you got new books every Wednesday, you just kind of lose track of everything. But lots of great contenders, of course, some Eisner winners and nominees on the list. But you guys ultimately chose Batman as your favorite continuing series. And Paul has a little bit of insight as to why the heck Batman had such a big year this year.
Oh, yeah, totally. Okay, so Batman, I think, is a character that is always, or Batman, I should say, the core title of Batman is always its best and worst enemy, in that if you are up to date on the continuity of Batman, you love most of it. Like, if you love Batman, you were already reading it. But I'll be honest, when I didn't read any Batman until I knew Tynen and Jorge Jimenez, who is hanging out with our Raptors right now, for best artist. Once I knew they were picking it up, I had to pick the book up. The reason being is because James Tynen is of the mind that there are so many incredible characters in Batman's Rogues Gallery. I mean, so many that, like, I think, unfortunately, if you're like, oh, the Joker's my favorite, people are like, well, actually, I'll tell you why there are so many better people. And I get that, with Tom King and with a lot of what artists like to do, is they definitely like to make the Joker Batman's shadow, which is great. That has led to so many awesome stories. But there is such thing as Joker fatigue. Like, I get it. And that's where I was at with Batman. And so to see, right, I sound like a hypocrite because the first thing that Tynen did is the Joker War. But the reason that he did that is because I think that was James Tynen IV's send-off for Joker, who he loves, I imagine, immensely. But he says there's so many other people in the Rogues Gallery that he had said, I'm going to focus on them solely. And not only did Tynen and Jimenez and Gillian Marge make Batman, incredibly accessible for people who didn't read all of the other 85 books, but they also introduced new characters for a new age of Batman. You're talking Punchline, who is incredibly successful, Ghostmaker, who is going to be a big part of 2021, and of course Clown Hunter. So whether or not you enjoyed them or not, someone did, and those are new characters that someone is going to enjoy. Like, those are going to be some of their definitive, Batman villains. And it's just nice to see writers take a chance in the lore of a character that is so established. Batman, I mean, is beyond established with its Rogues Gallery. So to see someone really come in and create new characters, you write yourself in a corner, but in the right way, because you have to create the villain and then they have to pose a threat to Batman in a completely new way. It can't just be a carbon copy of someone that exists. So Again, I could talk about Batman all day. I loved it so much. It was a great arc. It's I read. I mean, I didn't miss anything that Tynen and Jimenez had done, but surprisingly, it was not what I voted for best continuing series, and also it wasn't Amy's. But our choices did line up, didn't they?
Yeah, I think you and I had the same. Like,
did.
really, they didn't pick.
Yeah.
So our choice for best continuing series, both Paul and myself voted Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil with Marvel Comics,
So good.
with a rotating cast of artists, but of course, most notably Marco Cicchetto. Just amazing book going on over there that capped off its year with a bonkers issue that drove the speculators crazy. Yes, I'm talking about number 25 once again.
Once again.
But no, I've just been so surprised consistently at the dramatic quality of that series, and I've never followed a Daredevil book as closely. Where sometimes I'll jump in for an arc and then go, okay, this isn't really my thing. How many times can we play out the Catholic guilt and the identity crisis and the how much he needs to protect couple square blocks of New York, but just the way that Zdarsky has elevated the intrigue. He's so expertly woven Elektra into his story, and of course now in the late game he's like, haha, this was a story about Elektra, or it's going to be a story about Elektra now for a little while. Just the amazing just the dramatic quality and the fact that it doesn't feel like any other Daredevil story that's been told before, and the guts it takes to sideline your main character Thor can result in some amazing storytelling. And I think that's what made me most excited at the end of last year to go, oh my God, okay, I'm stuck with this book until it dies. Like, this is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I second everything that Amy says. It's why we love this book, but also it takes someone like Chip Zdarsky to stand in the shadow of, I mean, think about all of the incredible people that have written Daredevil. I mean, just to name a few: Frank Miller, Brubaker, Mark Waid, some incredible writers, and say that I'm going to do something completely different, put your own complete stamp on it. Like someone like Zdarsky was made for this book, I feel, in certain regards. So, I mean, we could rant on Daredevil literally all day, because it's such a great book. But yeah, I mean, really everything Amy said times two.
Yeah, and I never want to. You never want to make judgments on a writer based on what they've written previously, but it's the fact that it's Daredevil by the man who brought you Howard the Duck. Like, it's just wow, just so good. So our last category that you guys voted in, again, we're closing the pages and we're going to the screen. We had the best adapted media, and now this included actually a wide category or a wide range of different media. So this included some of the video game releases we saw this year, like Miles Morales, and The Avengers on PlayStation 4. And it also included films, what few films we had, like Birds of Prey, and then television series. That was kind of the bread and butter of this last year. And no surprise, or maybe a surprise to you, you guys voted The Boys Season 2 as the best adapted media this year. A lot of sophomore seasons, actually, for a number of shows. And so it was kind of a battle of the second outings. We had Doom Patrol Season 2. We had Harley Quinn Season 2. We had The Boys Season 2. But you guys decided, and I mean, critics absolutely agree. It had a 97% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It was the ultra-violent secondary outing of this superhero show that is so unlike other superhero shows because it was written by a guy who hates superheroes. It is, of course, adapted from the comic of the same name by Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson, published through both DC and Wildstorm. And, I mean, I personally have not seen it because I am still working through Doom Patrol and I can only do so many shows at one time. But I am very excited to get to it eventually. I know a lot about the series. It has some cool superhero alumni in it as well. I love that Erin Moriarty gets to play Starlight after being a fantastic character, but a victim nonetheless in Jessica Jones. Just seeing all these people, Carl Urban taking it from Thor Ragnarok, Billy Butcher, like, so great. And it did get nominated for a slew of awards in the first Critics' Choice Super Awards, which was more focused on genre fiction. They made a specific set of awards nominations. And so The Boys Season 2 was nominated for Best Superhero Series, Best Actor in a Superhero Series, Best Actress in a Superhero Series, Best Villain as well. So it's just a lot of great, I mean, you guys love to hate these guys. This is the 7, of course. And it's fun because they're pastiches. They've used the satire element to speak to the current world climate, but through the lens of these characters that we idolize, or the idea of a superhero that we idolize. I would not idolize a single one of these guys. 'Cause
Not
I know,
recommended.
yeah, I know what they do in comic books, but just a fantastic series. So it's well worth a watch. I
Mhm.
will eventually get to this season. But my personal choice was the Harley Quinn animated series, which we did note actually was less accessible for people. The Boys is available on Amazon Prime Video, which a lot of people have subscribed to. But some of the shows we nominated were on DC Universe, and we were very privileged to have access to DC Universe this year, and that is now transitioning into DC Universe Infinite, with many of the shows going off to HBO Max. But The Boys feels accessible to people who either love superheroes still a lot and maybe have read those comics, or don't really know anything about the worlds of DC and Marvel with the extensive
Yeah.
backstory. Because again, it always comes down to the extensive backstories. Harley Quinn, though, felt like just a buffet table of rewards for longtime comic book deep dive geeks.
Right.
And even if not, if you love that kind of crude humor that it presented, it was great, but it just felt so specific, but also that's why I loved it the most.
100%. Yeah, Harley Quinn animated season 2 is also my choice. It's just I looked forward to I think it was Friday, every single Friday that it came out. I didn't miss an episode, and I actually went back and rewatched everything again because it is so good. And it is nice to see a lot of the characters again that are taken so seriously in DC Comics continuity sort of turned on their head and nerfed, for if I can
The ones who are taken seriously, but then there's also Condiment King and Kite Man.
Right, they're to be taken seriously, Amy. And
I'm sorry, I loved Kite Man. He was just
he's incredible.
He's so great.
That show, for the best, has forever changed my view of Clayface. So I'll never ever not read a Batman book and not read it in Alan Tudyk's voice. So that's an accomplishment in and of itself.
Hashtag Cobb Squad. Now, we do have one regular segment you guys might recognize this week. We have the Hauler at the Hall, but we asked you guys to do all of this voting for us. You practically did our whole show for us. So we don't have question answers to read for you guys this week, but we do have questions, which actually Lauren Lopez on YouTube asked us. Just a perfect segue. Love when a plan comes together. What are you guys, us, Amy and Paul, most looking forward to reading in 2021? So Paul and I will answer, but then we ask you the same question. We want to know, what are your most anticipated book releases of 2021 so far? If you'll note, most publishers have only solicited up through March, but still, that is a ton of stuff coming up. I'm going to keep it brief. There are so many books that I'm excited about, and I just added all of them to my poll via the Comic Hub app because they updated at the beginning of January to get the March books in there. First of all, we've got Mariko Tamaki and Guri Hiru taking on Loki and Thor Double Trouble for Marvel, and that's going to be a mini-series about the brothers body swapping, and that's going to be adorable, and I freaking love it. And in that same vein, Daniel Warren Johnson is doing Beta Ray Bill.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. Awesome. So excited. And then for the independent series, as we mentioned earlier, Vault Comics strong out the gate. They've announced their series Witchblood, which is a little bit like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Sons of Anarchy. It's got a witch on a road trip cross country as she's being chased by vampires and such. And there's just like the fun supernatural. We got a witch on a bike. Tons of great art has already been previewed for that, so you can check that out on the Vault Comics Twitter, just if you are getting excited about that. But those are my top 3. Like, I can't wait for March. It needs to come sooner. Those are going to be great books.
Oh, yeah. So really quickly, I've got 2 Batman books. I'm looking forward to Batman 106, which is going to kick off a hopefully year-long event that deals with Scarecrow, who is one of my favorite villains, and that is by James Tynen and Gilliam March and Jorge Jimenez. That whole team is coming back. Also, not Generation Shattered. I'm sorry, Batman Urban Legend, being headed by also Chip Zdarsky, as well is doing some stories there. It's going to be like a anthology type Batman story, but on the indie side. I am looking forward to Noctera by Scott Snyder and Tony S. Daniel, of course. I mean, it's from Black Jacket Press, his new line. I've put a lot of money into that. Well, not a lot. I'm not, drowning in comic book dollars, but I put money into that on Kickstarter, and I am very yes. If I didn't blow out everyone's ears, I would do it right now. But so I'm very excited for that. Carmen #1 by Dan Christensen and Gilliam March over on Image. I'm also really, really looking forward, of course, to that Texas Blood picking back up in the third week of February. So there's a lot to look forward to. And then I should be caught up and be able to read King in Black by the time March rolls around. So I'm really, really ready to dig in.
It'll still be going. They've got a
Yes, it will.
couple more one-shots coming out that month. So yeah, you guys can check out all the solicited publishings from all your favorite publishers through January, February, and March. Get excited. But there is so much more of the year left to be revealed from these publishers, and we will continue to bring you guys all the weekly comic book news when you guys join us next week on January 13th at our usual time, 4 p.m. Pacific if you're watching live, and Thursday the following, that'll be the 14th on our podcasting platforms. We're going to be back to form. We're going to have our aims for you, pick of the week, all those cool stuff. I'm probably going to cover a couple of the books from this week because we definitely don't want to miss out on Eternals and some of those future state books. But just a lot of great stuff. So before we leave you, remember, our new Holler at the Hall question will go up in the Facebook group in Let Your Geek Sideshow. But what is your most anticipated book release of 2021? Take some time to check out those solicits if you haven't already and let us know. We will also be posting a new panel of the week. We're going to get that going again because Paul and I have a rivalry to continue. So you can look for that once again in our Facebook group sometime between now and the next show. And beyond that, we are so excited to have you guys back. Thank you so much for joining us. If you participated in the poll, your votes helped us put together this show. And if you guys missed out on that, we've got plenty of polls and things for you to vote on coming up in the future. Just thank you for sticking with us. We are so excited and optimistic about the comics that this year is going to bring. And don't forget, we have a giveaway going on our Instagram channel.
Oh, yeah.
You can find us on social at the Comics Hall at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. But specifically, if you want to enter to win that Daredevil Shadowlands 6-scale figure, you can check that out on our Instagram. And you can always email us at thecomicshall@sideshow.com. I think that's everything that we usually say. It's like getting back on the bike. We know how to do this. Try not to fall off the bike.
Just like reading a bike. You never forget.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. All right. Well, once again, we will see you guys next Wednesday, January 13th at 4 p.m. Pacific. Thank you guys so much for joining us. As always, I'm Amy.
And I'm Paul.
And this has been the Comics Hall. Thanks, guys.